Your hosts are here, Sammy and Michelle. By the end of this podcast, you'll know them well. Adulting, navigating the journey of life. Careers to relationships, pain and strife. Put down the rule book, rethink the status quo. If there's another direction you wanna go, find purpose, passion and mastery in all that you do. With Status Post Adulting.
Hey, Status Post Adulting fam! This is Sammy
and Michelle,
and this is the 5th episode of our podcast. And today we're going to be talking about finance basics. But first, let me check in with Michelle. How are you doing, Michelle?
I'm good. This week, to prepare myself for finance basics, I had to make a lot of calls for random things like my HSA, my 401k, clean up a bunch of stuff, and really got me in the frustrated, annoyed mindset so that I can relate even more to this topic.
Yes, literally. I always tell my coworkers that I work 4 days so that I can use the 5th day to organize my life.
Yeah. On the 7th day, God did his taxes. Oh, I did my taxes this week.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And after all that, I went on a super nice hike yesterday. So I did my week in a much more relaxing, scenic way. What about you, Sammy? How was your week?
My week was pretty good, mostly just working. I got to go for a run yesterday, which I was really excited about. I got finally back on my running routine. COVID kind of threw me off for a little bit, and I was pretty deconditioned afterwards, but now I'm feeling much better. So overall good. So before Michelle and I get started today, we do want to let you guys know that we are not financial professionals in any way, and the advice we're giving today is mainly based off of our experience and some things we've learned along the way. If you find any of these things interesting or useful, don't hesitate to do more research on your own.
So, Sammy and I have mentioned in the past that on Status Post Adulting, we'll be talking about different financial topics. One thing we wanted to make sure that we started with was what we consider your financial basics. A lot of this comes from commonly held ways to build wealth in a pretty straightforward and simple way. A lot of it we're aggregating from other financial professionals and things that we've heard online.
Yeah, Michelle, I think this podcast is mainly about making sure our listeners know maybe some of the basics or also like the most important things in regards to finance that will make the most drastic changes in your financial situation.
Exactly, Sammy. Little things that you can do that will have a big impact. And like we mentioned before, a lot of what our focus in with Status Post Adulting is about intentional living. And part of that is about being very intentional with your money.
Michelle, have you heard the good news?
What?
Tracking your spending can help you make life-changing decisions and build lasting wealth.
True. Less exciting, but true.
But that is where you are wrong, my little sister. It is not less exciting. It is the most exciting thing on the planet. What I love about tracking my spending is it really opened up my eyes to where my money was going. So when I first started tracking my spending, actually this is what I still do today, I created a Google document and I would create a chart for my spending for each paycheck. So everything that I spent that paycheck, I would list on the chart. And I would save my receipts, but I would also compare it to my bank accounts to confirm all of my purchases for that pay period.
She literally had all the receipts.
I have all my receipts in this purse that I call my receipt family.
A quick side note, every time I go somewhere with Sammy, we have to spend an extra 5 minutes standing out by the checkout as Sammy very delicately folds her receipts to put into a wallet.
Anywho, so I tracked my spending by pay period, and I could see how much I spent that pay period. Over time, I could see what are my biggest expenses. I knew some things like gas would be a large expense because I drive a far distance to work every day. But I was also spending money on a lot of things that didn't matter to me. And one of the first things I did was I took my top spending categories from my chart that I had on the Google Docs, and I also made a list of my top values. And I looked at them and compared them to see how they match up. And I saw that some things like Uber Eatsing dinner for no reason definitely don't belong anywhere on my values list. And yet I was spending tons of money on that kind of stuff. So it really helped me eliminate unnecessary spending and kind of get things down to what I actually needed to have my life meet my values. The reason tracking your spending is so important is because by tracking your spending, you will be able to save and invest more money. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking a lot about savings accounts and investment accounts. And I remember when I first learned about all these, I was like, I want to invest in all my tax advantaged accounts and my investment accounts, but where am I going to get all this money? And it was only through tracking my spending that I could really bring down my spending so that I would have enough money to save and invest to build long-term wealth.
It's so true, Sammy. You're definitely one of the people I know who does this the most diligently. And the truth of it is that you can't be intentional about your money if you don't know where your money is going. And I know a lot of people like to say, I know where my money's going. I can list off, yesterday I did this and this and this and this. But if you're really not organizing it, you don't know the aggregate you're spending, and you don't know if it lines up with things that you want your money to go to. And then when it comes to building wealth, paying down debt, saving money, investing, you might want to be putting more money to those things. And what tracking your spending does is make you aware of where your money is going and prioritizing it to what's important to you. So with that being said, Sammy, what are we starting out with?
We are starting out with the big D, debt.
Not my favorite, big D.
Yes, Michelle, not anyone's favorite.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, I feel comfortable saying nobody likes to talk about debt. Nobody likes to think about their debt.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one thing I always notice is in my job is that people are always more than happy to take vitamins and supplements because they feel like they're making themselves healthier. But fixing the things that are wrong with you, that's not always fun. And that's kind of like debt versus like some of these other topics. The other topics feel like, hey, I'm making myself wealthier, I'm making myself stronger. Versus debt is like,
oh my God, I can't believe I still have to pay this off.
Yes, exactly.
Was it worth it to go to college?
Exactly. It's not fun. It feels like a problem that you have to fix. But it's important and, it can be fun. It can be fun.
That is one of those things, Sammy, I would say that when you face the music, it's so much more of a relief than avoiding it. Trust me, I know. I avoided my student loans for a long time. At the end of the day, when I finally took a look and just broke it down, it was so much less of a problem and a mental, like a mind suck than it needed to be.
Yeah, Michelle, I mean, that's a great point. Debt to a lot of people can feel like handcuffs. People have so many problems because of debt. And as you get rid of debt, you literally feel that freedom come back to you.
And we're here to normalize talking about it. And I would say the first thing to do when it comes to debt, breathe in. Breathe in through your nose,
Yes.
out through your mouth. Open up all of your different financial institutions, whatever
Accounts.
it is, accounts, and start to break it down. And what does that really look like, Sammy?
Yeah, exactly, Michelle. With debts, I mean, there's two big factors. There's the amount of debt that you have for each type of debt, whether it's a credit card debt, whether it's a car loan, whether it's student loan debt.
Health insurance, or not health insurance, health costs.
Yes, healthcare related debts. The first thing is look at the actual principal or the main amount for each debt. How much do you owe for each different type of debt? Then the next important thing is looking at the interest rate for each debt because that makes a big difference. Things like credit cards, they have interest rates in the double digits. That's super high. You want to get rid of them as soon as possible.
Exactly, Sammy. What you want to do is figure out what the hierarchy of the money you owe looks like. There's going to be a middle point, right? You have the amount of money that you owed from the beginning, and then how that money is growing because of the interest on top of it.
I think it's a good time to discuss interest right now because interest can work in the negative, credit card, consumer debts, where it's increasing the amount that you owe, but later interest can also work in the positive. Like my index funds have an average interest rate of 8%. Every time I look at it, it's even more magical. And when it comes to debt in a negative, magical sense.
Sammy, you could say that debt is the least interesting interest to look at.
Yeah, you could say debt is the Kourtney Kardashian of the interest family.
Ouch.
But not actually because we love Kourtney.
Seriously, Sammy, why is the interest that you have on your debt so painful?
Yeah, Michelle, great question. And I know numbers, they're really conveyed best on a podcast through examples. So let's say you have an $1,000 credit card balance, and your credit card, like many credit cards do, has a 20% interest, which accrues monthly. Let's say that first month you're like, I really can't pay this off. Next thing you know, the second month, you have $1,200 in your account because the $1,000 accrued a 20% interest of $200. Now you have $1,200. Do you know how much you'd have after not paying that for a year?
I mean, I'm not that good at math.
Neither am I, and that's why I have this handy spreadsheet and spreadsheet equation, which tells me that you would have $7,430.08 to cry about after 1 year of not paying that credit card balance.
So the $1,000 that you owed month one, after compound interest of 20%, you owe $7,430.08 in 12 months. It literally increases by 7x. A lot of times that's how, like, the painful reality of debt and the compounding interest. And so it's important to, once again, know how much money you owe to each of your debts and what the interest rate is. Best case situation, being able to predict that out as far as you need to, and using that to figure out, okay, what is the most painful after a year, 2 years? And that'll tell you which ones you should start to pay off first. A lot of times it's going to be the ones with the highest interest.
Yeah, Michelle, I mean, you bring up a great point, and I think this is actually a debated topic. The main thing is you get your balances for all your debts, and you also look at their interest rates. Some people believe in paying off the highest interest rate debts first, because this is actually going to be the most fruitful to you as far as like how much money you pay off in the long term. But there is a solid argument for paying off the smallest debts first, because there is a huge psychological win in paying off small debts and then seeing them disappear, and then going to the next smallest debt and then paying that off and then seeing that disappear, and just seeing that little check mark that you have to pay just being completely gone from your list. Whatever works for you, it's completely a psychological game. So whatever you think would work best for you is best.
I agree, Sammy. There are different schools of thoughts as to how you should tackle it. I think if you know how much money you owe and how that interest is compounding, at that point, you can make a very intentional and educated decision.
Yeah, and if you're someone who has a lot of credit card debts, car debts, one great resource is Dave Ramsey. He has a whole community and lots of books based off of paying off debt, which I think are really motivating. Definitely check him out if you're someone in the position of having lots of debts in general. Alrighty, Michelle, the next topic I think is one of my favorite topics, and that is saving money.
I think we have yet to record a podcast where you don't say something is your favorite podcast or your favorite topic, which I just wanted to clarify. There is a hierarchy to favorite. I'm not sure if everything could be your favorite.
Okay, this is one of my favorites. And the reason I love saving money is because as I saved more money, I felt increasingly free with every amount that I saved.
I hear you, Sammy. When you reframe your mind and you start to see like, hey, every dollar I save is another hour I don't have to, be tied to a job in the future or whatever it is, making progress to your goal, it does make it a lot more satisfying instead of just being like, well, I'm just hoarding this and I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. I mean, I literally feel like the more money I have saved up, the more creative I am. And it's a very interesting thing. Money affects our mindset a lot.
More money, less problems.
But as far as savings go, the first thing we want to bring up is an emergency fund.
100% agree, Sammy. This is something that I think the severity of which is only more evident after going through the beginnings of a pandemic and having a lot of uncertainty, a lot of businesses going out of business, a lot of uncertainty in jobs that people felt were very stable, whatever it was. Obviously, I think at this point in time, everyone is very aware of what uncertainty looks like.
Yeah, Michelle. I mean, the thing about emergencies is you can't predict them, but you can predict that things will happen and you may need an extra surplus of money.
So true, Sammy. We're not all psychics, and we need to try to prepare ourselves to the best of our ability.
Yes, despite our family history, we're not all psychics. We'll get into that in a later episode.
Anyway, so when it comes to an emergency fund, I would say the rule of thumb is to have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. So being able to survive if you lost your income for 3 to 6 months.
Yes, yeah. That means being able to pay your bills, being able to have food, being able to purchase your necessities for 3 to 6 months. And obviously you can have a larger emergency fund If that makes you feel more safe and more comfortable, definitely do that. But I think a minimum 3-month emergency fund is very reasonable for most people.
And the way to know how much money you need month over month is taking a step back and looking at what are your expenses every month? What are the things that maybe consistently come up, different surprise fees, things like that. It all really comes back to knowing what you're spending on so that you're able to prepare yourself for an extended period of time, whatever period of time you decide that for. So for example, if I spend $3,000 a month, times that by 3 to 6, and you get an emergency fund of about $9,000 to $18,000.
Yeah, Michelle. And that doesn't mean you're going to build up your emergency fund in a day. It can take time to accumulate. When I was first building up my emergency fund, I would just have a certain amount of my paycheck go straight to a savings account. And it took time to build that into a solid emergency fund. Make a plan for it. Definitely build that up first.
And I would say of all the things that we recommend today, paying off debt and building your emergency fund are two of the most important things. It's okay to do both of those things at the same time, or even prioritize your emergency fund to a certain extent, just because anything can happen at any point, and it is good to try to get to that point as soon as possible.
Yeah, definitely, Michelle. And next thing about savings, it's important to put your money in a place that has a reasonable interest rate. Savings account, they're not magical. They don't have super high interest rates, but at the same time, some are definitely better than others.
Yes, Amy, this is a great point. So when you're saving money, presumably you're saving your money in a savings account, unless it's under your mattress, in which case, I guess don't listen to this next part. Assuming that you have the money that you're saving in a savings account, something that's important to think about is your APY, which is your annual percentage yield, which basically means how much interest is your savings account given back to you every single month, every single year.
Yeah, Michelle. A lot of us automatically put our savings with the big bank, but a lot of these big banks have really, really low interest rates. So check your bank, compare it to the top APY, top interest savings accounts, like the highest yield savings accounts, to see what would be a better option for you.
This is something, Sammy, that I did not consider.
No, you didn't, despite me telling you.
And I was so brand loyal to one of the first banks that I had used. I have my credit cards through this bank. And I was, as we said in our last podcast, I have a tendency to save a lot and hoard my money. And when I finally looked it up and just compared a few banks, it's very easy to do on Google. Honestly, we would give a recommendation, but it does change and there are a lot of other things to think about too. But I looked at the APY for my bank versus some of the high yield saving accounts and I switched one. So I had my savings in Bank A. I moved my savings to Bank B, and with Bank B, my APY in a month was more than it was in a year with my other bank, my original bank. And so it can definitely make a really big difference.
Yeah, Michelle. And the interest rates for these high yield savings accounts, they definitely change. But I guess the general advice is to put your money in one of the savings accounts that generally has a higher yield.
And one reason this is important is with inflation, without going so deeply into it, if you do keep your money under a mattress and you're not gaining any sort of interest on it, you're not even keeping up with inflation. So technically your money is losing value year over year. And then the other thing is, if you are saving your money and it is just sitting there, especially in the sense of say like an emergency fund, something that you want to have very liquid, something that you can access really quickly, it's still nice if in a very low risk way, you're earning a little bit more on top of it.
Yeah, definitely. Next, a quick note on bills.
Bills. Bills
seem like something that are fixed, and that is a lie that they tell you, and never believe it.
It's true, Sammy. Something I learned being in sales and being on the other end of the phone is a lot of times, if you ask, you shall receive. What do I mean by that, Sammy?
Yeah, so there's all kinds of bills. There's car insurance bills, there's utility bills, there's home insurance.
There's the frickin' fee I get if I don't hit a minimum for paper fees. I dealt with this all this week.
Yes, a lot of different types of bills. The truth is, you can usually find some way to bring a lot of those down. For example, with car insurance, they recommend annually checking your car insurance rate with other companies to see what the lower payment would be for you. Another thing is like for your utilities. If you call them up and say, hey, if I paid 6 months at once rather than paying monthly, can I have a lower rate? Sometimes they will say yes.
Those are great ones, Sammy. Another thing is if you ever do get a fee on your credit card or whatever it is, if you don't pay your Texas tag thing on time, whatever it is, I literally always ask if they will forgive it this time. And honestly, I would say 99.99% of the time they do. That's a statistic I made up, but,
Yes.
but for me, it's true. So shoot your shot is basically what this tip is. When it comes to money, when it comes to anything
Fees.
that you're paying, just ask.
Yeah, definitely. Fees are generally forgiven, so always ask.
Fees are negotiable.
Everything is negotiable. Alrighty, so our next topic is investing. Investing is where interest comes back, and now it is working in our favor.
The Kim Kardashian of interest rates.
Some would say the Kylie.
Right. So, Sammy, like I mentioned, I did my taxes this week, which is always a fun use of my time.
Yeah, I really enjoy doing taxes too.
So doing my taxes always reminds me of how much money comes out of my paycheck before it comes into my hands. The next thing to really think about when you're starting with your finances and you're looking at ways to optimize is how can I get more of that money that I earn?
Yes, that darn rascal Uncle Sam is always taking our money. But Aunt Sam is here to help you get it back. And Aunt Michelle too.
All right, leave me out of this.
But actually, there are multiple different types of accounts that we can use to help us reduce our taxes either today or in the future. We have things like 401ks, 403bs, SEP IRAs, solo 401ks, Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs.
That's what we call financial ASMR.
The list goes on, and honestly, we're not going to get into all of them today. So one way to reduce your taxes today is by putting your money into accounts like your 401k or 403b, depending on what company you work for. These are pre-tax accounts, so the money is coming directly from your paycheck to you without getting taxed. With that said, in the future, when you pull it out after retirement, you will be taxed at that time, but it helps reduce your tax percentage today.
Exactly, Sammy. There is a lot to be said about pre-tax retirement accounts. For the interest of this episode, there are certain basics that we do want to cover. 1, what pre-tax accounts do you have available to you from your company? 2, are you contributing? If yes, that's great. If not, it's something that you should definitely investigate to see if you have the means to, because these are dollars that are coming out of your salary and not being taxed. 3, does your employer match? My first employer matched, and it was great because if I contributed up into the match percentage, that's free money for me. That's literally just free money. And 4, are you maxing out your pre-tax retirement accounts? If not, are you able to? This is a tough one because not everyone necessarily has the means to max out their, say, 401k. That being said, the recommendation even I think is maybe 6, 8, 10, whatever % of your salary. But really take a look at your finances, really take a look at how much money you're spending, and are you able to allocate more to your 401k? Once you get to a point where you are able to afford maxing out your pre-tax retirement incomes, then you're really maximizing your salary that you're getting every single year.
Yeah, Michelle. And that's definitely something personal and to investigate on your own side. Maybe the pre-tax account versus the post-tax account is not worth it for you, but definitely something to look into.
That's exactly right, Sammy. Everybody's situation is different. And once again, it's really about knowing what your finances look like, knowing what your situation looks like, how contributing more could affect your life. For me, for example, when I started out, I was, I think, maybe hitting my match with my 401k. But for me, because I'm in sales and I make so much of my income off of bonus and commission, I was getting taxed like crazy on them. And so it was super advantageous for me to invest more in my 401k. And honestly, I just had never thought about it before. I didn't even really understand what the maximums were or anything like that. And so it was super advantageous to me because instead of getting, say, 40% of my bonus, I could then actually save a lot more and have that invested into my 401k.
Yeah, Michelle. And another tax-advantaged account is your Roth IRA. The Roth IRA is an account where you put in post-tax dollars And then those dollars grow over time, accrue interest over time. And when you take out money from the Roth IRA, you don't have to pay taxes. You don't have to pay taxes on the original amount, and you don't have to pay taxes on any money that you may have gained through interest, which is huge, especially if you're investing for the long term. Roth IRAs do have some salary income limits, which vary per year. This is a good one to look into to know what the salary income limits are and to investigate the backdoor Roth, which is a strategy to get around this income limit in a legal manner. And I'll post some links about this in the show notes.
That's definitely a great one. Also, something that I wish we could go into more, but something to flag is that if you do have a health savings account or an HSA, that's another tax advantage account because those are pre-tax dollars. Money that you can put away for health-related payments that do not get taxed.
And don't they also not get taxed on the way out?
No, they do not. And with an HSA specifically, you're able to use it at any point, even if you leave your employer.
Yeah, Michelle. And not everybody qualifies for an HSA. I unfortunately don't, but if you do, it's a great option. Okay, so we just talked about your tax-advantaged accounts. So that includes 401ks, 403bs, Roth IRAs, HSAs. Those are all tax-advantaged accounts. But what happens after you've paid off your debts, you've got your emergency fund, you've maxed out your tax-advantaged accounts, and now you have extra money that you want to use to build wealth? Of course, there's your savings account, but savings accounts generally have pretty low interest rates. So that's when post-tax investment accounts come into the picture.
Yes, Sammy. For me, when I was being less intentional about my money and I was sort of just saving and I didn't have a plan for it, part of the reason I was doing that is I was really intimidated by risking my money in the stock market. There are so many crazy different options out there, and I think I just had decision fatigue as far as trying to optimize the best way to make the most money with the extra money that I had.
Yeah, I find that to be really common. I mean, this is your hard-earned dollars. You don't want to put it in something where you feel like you could lose money. At the same time, you don't want your money to sit there and not gain wealth.
The truth of the matter is, as of right now, a savings account that has even, like a 2% yield would be an extreme win. Chances are you're not really building wealth, you're sort of just saving it. Trying to dip our toe into this pool is definitely something that we won't be able to do full justice to. And it's always an ongoing conversation. But there are pretty simple things to consider when investing your money. And in fact, more complicated, more work, more risk, etc., has been proven to not yield a higher return on average.
Yeah, Michelle, we hear a lot about people who do a lot of active trading, meaning regular trading in the market. But a Fidelity study evaluating the best returns between 2003 and 2013 found that the best investors were either dead or inactive, meaning people who forgot that they had that account. And I think that's good insight into the fact that a lot of times less is more. So I think a big fear of people's is, if I invest in this one company that I think is really great, they can either do super, super well, or it's possible that in the future they could go all the way down to zero and I will lose all my money.
Sammy, high level, what are some terms that we should understand?
Yeah, I think that when people are first looking at investing, some terms that would be good to know are knowing the difference between individual stocks, actively managed mutual funds, and index funds. Quick caveat, we're going to do as much justice as we can from a high level, but this is definitely something you'll want to investigate in detail on your own. Okay, so for individual stocks, that's looking at the stock for one individual company, whether it's Apple, Tesla, GM, Coca-Cola, GameStop, no reason in particular. These are stocks for that individual company.
Exactly, Sammy. There's a lot of risk associated with investing in an individual company. The most extreme being that company can completely go out of business.
Yeah, exactly, Michelle. And the next group is actively managed mutual funds. So this refers to a group of stocks which are hand-selected by someone who actively manages the funds, meaning that person is consistently evaluating the funds, buying and selling different stocks to create a group of stocks that they think will be optimal for the person they are selling to.
And Sammy, a good thing to note here is a lot of times the people who are managing these funds are trying to beat the market.
Yes, their general goal is to beat the overall stock market, but one major thing about these funds is they often have high fees. And the data shows that over time, most of them do not beat the stock market. The last one we're going to talk about is index funds. So index funds are also a group of stocks, but rather than being so actively managed, whereas someone's regularly picking which stocks are going to be in and out, they are more passively managed. They are based off of the top performing companies. This includes things like the S&P 500, NASDAQ, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and because these are less actively managed, meaning whoever is managing them just has to know what the top companies are at that time and then change them based on the top companies, there are generally lower fees for these type of funds.
And the comparison is pretty big because with index funds, a lot of times you're looking at rock bottom fees, less than 1%.
Often no fees. Nowadays, there's multiple no fee accounts.
Fees may not seem like a big deal. A lot of times they sound like low percentages, but as your money grows, 5% of $10 is obviously a lot less than 5% of $100,000, 5% of $1 million. And the main reason that index funds are popular is because what happens historically, like Sammy mentioned, is that even though you're paying these higher fees, even though you have these managed mutual funds, statistically, they do not outperform the market. They do not outperform index funds. So you're paying more and you're really not guaranteed to get a better result.
Yeah, exactly, Michelle.
Not just not guaranteed. As time goes on, let's say it's about apparently 30% that will beat the market in the first year. The crazy thing is, after 30 years, that percentage drops to less than 1% beating the market. And that's why we say doing less is more. Trying to play the market, buy a bunch of individual stocks, or pick the best mutual fund and pay high fees. Again, historically, they aren't performing your good old-fashioned index funds.
Yeah, Michelle. And I think a big key to this is we're investing for the long term. Because in the short term, the market can go either up or down. But in the long term, over the course of decades, the market does generally go up.
Exactly, Sammy. And going back to what you said earlier, with the fear of, the money that you invested going down to zero. The logic is that if you invest in one company, that company can definitely go out of business. And that's much more likely to happen than the whole S&P 500 going bankrupt. I mean, the United States would be in a very bad place if that happened.
Yeah, definitely, Michelle. If that's happening, you're going to find me in a bunker with all my canned foods until the doomsday comes.
I mean, there's some people who've lived through some crazy things, and that's why you find money under their mattress.
Yes, definitely.
Definitely not recommended financial advice.
One thing we didn't talk a lot about today is bonds, and bonds are more conservative investments that generally do better than savings accounts, but it was a bit more than we can talk about today, so we'll get into detail on them in a future episode.
Exactly, Sammy. Part of what we wanted to introduce in this Finance Basics episode when it comes to investing your money is there are good things to educate yourself on, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. And the barrier to entry isn't as high as it seems, nor will it require you to do a lot of work once you start investing your money.
Yeah, Michelle, investing does not have to be super complicated. You can be relatively conservative investing in index funds, and that's a huge pillar of the FIRE community. It's just low-cost index funds as a pillar to building wealth.
That's a great point, Sammy, because you see some of these people that are retiring early, and you might think, wow, they must have, hit it big with some crazy stock or whatever it is. And in actuality, it's just about being consistently putting money into these low-cost index funds, maxing out their 401k, tackling their debt, saving money, and building wealth that way.
But we all have urges, don't we?
I don't know. What are you talking about?
I'm talking about when you want to join the GameStop clan and you want to just
invest in Bitcoin, Tesla, whatever other things are out there.
You're just trying to rocket ship emoji, diamond hands.
Hold. And look, we understand that nothing we've covered is sexy.
Nothing is sexy, and that doesn't mean that you can't do sexy things.
Yes, there is a whole thing of dumpster fire money.
Yeah, Michelle. The dumpster fire represents a small portion of your money that you allocate to your foolishness so that you don't blow your entire nest egg on some impulse buy.
Yeah. A dumpster fire is basically something that you just throw things that you have no qualms about losing into. And that's the same with your dumpster fire money. This is money that you can set aside that if you completely lost, you would be totally fine with. And, maybe one day you meet a guy and he smokes a lot of weed and he tells you that marijuana stocks are going to be the next big thing. And you're like, you know what? I have a little bit of money to put into that. I'm not speaking from personal experience, but yeah, at least you knew it was your dumpster fire money. But in all seriousness, a lot of people do try different things when it comes to investing their money. They take risk and sometimes they do lose out and you lose money, or a stock that you invested in burns down California. I don't know. But the point is that one, you shouldn't be we're not shaming you for that by any means. And also be very, very careful. You should never be putting all of your savings, pulling out your 401k, anything like that to invest in these things. So you have to know that it has to be money that you can lose. It's like, go into the slots. Maybe you're going to hit it big, but don't put the house on it.
And if you still don't feel comfortable and you want to talk to a financial professional, I think that's totally reasonable. But one thing I will note is do check to ensure that your financial advisor is a fiduciary. That means that your financial advisor's only incentive is to help you do well with your investments, because there are a lot of financial advisors who are trying to sell certain products. And that's their job, but you don't want to get caught up in that. So whenever you're speaking with a financial advisor, ask if they're a fiduciary and ask if they're a fiduciary in all of their interactions with you.
Sammy makes a great point. Like I said, I've worked in sales for the last 6 years, and I like to think of myself as an honest person. But when you are benefiting from what somebody does, you almost always make a recommendation where you're going to make money.
Yeah, Michelle, I think the main takeaway is do your research. We spend so much time looking at things like Amazon reviews for the best mattress. If you still sleep on a mattress, I recommend the Fuller. Or what kind of face lotion to use, or which sunscreen is going to give you a white sheen or not. Or maybe you want the one with the white sheen so that you know it's on and that you're protected against that demon called the sun. Personal problem. The truth is, if we're willing to spend time looking at those kind of things because we know that that is going to affect us, we definitely want to spend more time looking at our finances and making sure that we're saving, because that's going to affect not only our future, but our family's future as well.
That's such a true point, Sammy. The truth is, in this day and age, we have the luxury of being able to log in online and learn about anything we want to learn about. That's something that people didn't have even 50, 60 years ago. And the truth is, the earlier you're able to take advantage of these different things, the more you're able to compound on responsible financial decisions, and you'll see that payback in dividends in your future. I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that I spent the week having to sort out a bunch of different fees and details for different financial things that I had. And honestly, I called the companies and I said, I have no idea what's going on and I'm just trying to figure it out. Can you walk me through this? Everybody was super happy to do so. They were very knowledgeable, and that small investment of time and honestly vulnerability and just being like, I should probably know this, but I don't, helped me so much. And it's something that every time I put something off, every time I get annoyed when I see something come in the mail that I know I should be working on, once I do it and it literally takes a third of the time I expected it to, I am always like, I can't believe I just let that sit. I didn't deal with it. Now I'm glad I'm on a better path, but the truth is I should have done it earlier. But like one of my favorite quotes attributed to a Chinese proverb is, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. The same is true about taking control of your finances. It's really easy to beat yourself up about what you could have done in the past. But at the end of the day, if you start today, you're already putting yourself in a much better position than if you had done nothing at all.
Yeah, Michelle, you could say that advice really compounds when you're talking about your finances.
I'm not interested in your jokes, Sam.
So obviously we can't get through all of finance basics in one podcast.
We kind of thought we could, and then we started recording this.
And there's other things like increasing your income by increasing your salary or side hustles or building assets such as businesses and real estate. We can't cover all that today, but this is a conversation we're going to continue throughout our podcast, and we hope we were able to give you a good starting point today.
As a disclaimer, Sammy and I do want to clarify that our podcast contributes to the financial media that's out there. Financial media includes blogs, YouTube videos, podcasts, anything that's unregulated and giving financial information.
We are not financial experts or financial professionals, and we are not a substitute for financial experts such as accountants, financial advisors, attorneys, or anyone that you would consult before making legal or financial decisions. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only.
Thank you so much for joining Sammy and I for another episode of Status Post Adulting.
Michelle and I have had such a great time putting these podcasts together for you all. Check us out on Instagram at Status Post Adulting, or you can email us with any questions or topic ideas at statuspostadulting@gmail.com. If you guys have been enjoying the podcast and you want to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, we'd really appreciate it. Join us again next time as we put down the rulebook and rethink the status quo.